All right. Welcome, everybody from Coldwell Banker. We have a treat today. And Mike, can you get this party started?
Absolutely. Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it. Well, welcome all Coldwell Banker agents, management, leadership team throughout the country and a few throughout the world. I know have popped into our past Zooms over the past few weeks. I am Mike Prodell. I am with Coldwell Banker Real Estate Group here in Illinois. I'd say sunny, but it's a little gloomy here today. We represent the Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana areas of the country. I also want to send a big shout out to Peter, obviously for all of his work. I think he's now our new Zoom guru, but Peter from CB West in San Diego. We've got Chuck Whitehead, who has helped us through the past few weeks in bringing speakers to this series. Chuck from CB Associated Brokers. Todd Conklin from CB Distinctive Homes, our Distinctive Properties, which all of you, I believe, know. Mike Carter and our friend Joe Gilmore at CB Legacy in Albuquerque. Sean Blankenship from CB Collins Murray in Memphis. And last but not least, Rick Gregory and my good buddy Tim Milam from CB Advantage in the Carolinas. I just wanted to start out by saying that this series, these guys have done a great job. We've all just put our resources together here to bring what we thought was great timing and crucial in this time of uncertainty. So I want to thank all of the individuals I mentioned because, you know, as this brand is great and offers us so many things, the friendships and the relationships that we have here have helped put together this incredible series that continues and will continue on through even next week. So I want to thank all you guys for that. Before I introduce my good friend Eric Maddox, I just wanted to give a little story here on how Eric and I met and have become friends over the years. This will be my fourth time hearing Eric speak, and each time it gets more and more incredible. My wife and I ran into Eric at one of our first YPO events in Chicago at the Pritzker Museum. I walk into an event, I'm there. There's, I don't know that many people, but I do know some faces in the room. I'm in a conversation with a group of guys, and there's this one individual who's listening to every word everyone's saying so intensely that it was incredible to me that somebody was listening to each person the way that he was. And while I thought he looked familiar, I walked to the bar afterwards, and here he is standing next to me. I'm like, I think we know each other. He looked at me and he's like, I don't think so. He then introduced himself as Eric Maddox, the person that we were there to meet, who was the lead interrogator who led to the capture of Saddam Hussein. I was beside myself. He was as real as could be, but every time I spoke, he listened to every word I said. You know, one of the things I think is the biggest mistakes we make today as agents is we talk more than we listen. And when we all listen to Eric's message, I think one of the biggest things is you know, we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should use them in equal proportion and listen more than we do talk. And one of the philosophies I live by, and most of my team knows, is that they don't care what you know until they know how much you care. And you know, the more we pay attention to that and stop and remember that there's fears in the world today, and there's a lot of anxiety around, you know, listing and selling their homes. We've had some great series leading us up to this point. We've had Steve Harney, who's talked about, you know, the current environment that we're in, the housing market, and how we can deliver that message positively. And we have to be the Cavaliers in doing that. To Nick, which I won't even begin to pronounce his last name, who talked through perseverance and how to overcome our fears in the past, or driving past our fears. Jason Pantana, who helped us talk about delivering that message and how do we get the engagement online, to Tom Ferry himself, who talked about mindset. And these times, you know, will define us more than ever before. So I think this is a perfect segue into what Eric's talk is. And Eric, I want to introduce you to the rest of the Coldwell Banker family. I appreciate you taking the time today. I should take my own advice and listen more than I talk. I do think your story has hit home with a lot of us. I'd say probably 3/4 of our company has heard you speak. I know that when we announced that you were going to be talking, that the majority of the feedback I was getting was, I can't wait to see him again, how awesome he is. He's my favorite. You do such a great job. You have done such a great job serving our country. Eric came from the Army. And I thought more than anything, it'd be better for Eric to kind of lay out his story for those that haven't seen him and kind of set the groundwork for how he ended up teaching on this empathy-based listening. So Eric, why don't you tell us or tell the group how you came from being in the Army, became a Mandarin linguist, which I thought was odd when you said it, but you were with, you got put in the Defense Intelligence Agency as a Mandarin linguist. And how do you then end up doing what you did? So can you lead us there?
Thanks, Mike. So tracking down Saddam Hussein, if you looked at where you would grab someone leading up to that war, I would be probably the last person they would have picked. As a matter of fact, so when we went to war in Iraq in 2003, I was a staff sergeant in the Army, but they had taught me Chinese Mandarin. They trained me as interrogator, but they all along said, you'll never actually do interrogations. We're going to have you as a Chinese Mandarin intelligence collection officer. So I'm living in LA when we go to war in Iraq, and they said, you'll never step foot in Iraq. It's never going to happen. So 3 months into the war in Iraq, I get these really unexpected orders. Matter of fact, my commander said, Eric, we got these top secret orders. They're just for you. They don't say where you're going. And I was like, do they speak Chinese in Iraq, sir? Is there something I missed? And he said, I don't know what this is. I show up in Iraq and I've never been to war. I've never done an interrogation. I don't know anything about Saddam. And I had no idea who this unit was. So as soon as I get there, they tell me there's this Joint Special Operations Command. It's Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, 75th Rangers, and their mission is to track down the most wanted people in the world. And Saddam Hussein is the most wanted man in the world. He is the Ace of Spades. So you guys all remember, deck of cards, all that stuff. And they're saying, we're supposed to kill, capture every single person on the deck of cards. And that's what this Joint Special Operations, that's what you've been thrown into, Eric. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's so cool. I've always wondered where they kept people like you. Why am I here? I'm a Chinese Mandarin linguist. And they said, we needed to find an interrogator to go out on missions. They said, the only reason you're here is because we have Delta Force teams out in the Badlands, out there doing raids, like actually kicking in doors and grabbing bad people. And they want interrogators to go with them. And they said, Eric, you used to be infantry. And Mike, when I first enlisted in 94, I was infantry, paratrooper, 82nd Airborne Division, went to Ranger School, graduated the Army's Ranger School, then did all this Chinese Mandarin stuff. And they said, we looked at every single interrogator that was in the Army for background of infantry and a graduate of Ranger School. They're like, you were the only one. So here you are. So that was kind of the backdrop of where I got started and why I had any reason going into this war.
But you had never interrogated anyone before this.
So my role as a Chinese Mandarin linguist was when Chinese people came into the US, I would interview them, right, in Chinese. I actually was stationed in Beijing, China. So I worked there, but actual interrogations, battlefield prisoners, never. And was told I would never do them, right? It was something I was trained on years before, had never actually done one before. So when I'm with this new task force, they quickly, before I even got my bags unpacked, they sent me to Saddam Hussein's hometown in Tikrit, Iraq. And there's a Delta Force team up there. And they sent me going, hey, grab your weapon. They're about to go on as soon as you land, they're going on a raid. They're taking you with them. So I'm coming from LA to my first war zone, immediately to Saddam's hometown, picked up by these Delta guys, and we go out and do this raid. Never, I mean, I've been in a war zone. We go on this raid, and they give me the name. They said, try to find this guy when we get there. That was the intel. We do this raid. They blow down these doors, and I'm talking to these guys, and it's like, oh my gosh, the person they're looking for is not here. And that was my first indication, like, we don't really have a plan. There's not a strategy at all of what's going on.
So where do you start? Where do you start to track down the most wanted man on the planet?
So I started with catching my breath. I mean, like that first night, if you can imagine, first time into a war zone, we did raids all night long. Next day, the Delta Force commander brought me in and he said, all right, here's the deal. We don't know who the enemy are. There are no uniforms. There's no smoking guns. We've never done anything like this before. The prisoners are civilians, and we have no idea who the bad guys are shooting us. So I first said, okay, just let me get a feel for the prisoners. I brought a couple in. I had been trained, right? The old Army techniques of interrogations. I start talking to these prisoners using these techniques, and they're not torture, but it's intimidation. We know everything about you. You better tell us. And it doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, Eric, we've never fought a war like this before. They haven't found Saddam. Let's not assume anybody knows anything. And I said, what's the problem? And I said, for me individually, I have to know somebody. I got to get inside their mind. I know me. I'm kind of an emotional. I like to get inside somebody's mind and their soul. So I started just talking to the prisoners and figure out what makes them tick. And it's amazing that they will answer your questions if you talk to them about their life and their experiences. And so for me, it was simply getting to know them. But then I started to realize, wait a second, it's not getting to know them. It's how you look at them, how you talk to them in a way that says, I'm not judging you as an enemy. I'm not seeking to get a confession. I'm trying to figure out what you're doing here, why you're here, and is there anything that could actually get you out of here? And as I did that, these prisoners start opening up, start revealing information they knew about the insurgency, which my commander loved. This Delta Force commander's like, Eric, this is awesome. Keep being nice to him. I'm like, I'm not being nice to him. I'm listening. He said, whatever, just get us targets. So we would go capture these enemy, and I would do the same thing with them to the point to where we started, my Delta Force commander, his name's Bam Bam, started allowing me to have these prisoners live in our house. And they were locked up. They had their own section. But they would live with us. They didn't want to go to the prison. I didn't want to take them to the prison. And we started becoming friends, working as a team. And we're going through hundreds of prisoners. We lay out the entire insurgency in this Saddam's hometown. But what we started to realize is, wait, this thing's so powerful. I know these people so well. There's no way this thing's being run not under the control of Saddam. So this leads us to Saddam had these bodyguards that he trusted to protect him. And then there was this one particular bodyguard that had this control over this insurgency. And we start focusing on this man, this bodyguard. Well, we captured his driver. And the driver says, hey, that bodyguard, he's taking all orders and all money from Saddam Hussein. And the driver said, Eric, I deliver millions and millions of dollars throughout the Sunni Triangle. I deliver money and orders for every single attack. And that bodyguard, my boss, he's taking all orders from Saddam. Now, as we're getting this information, we're feeding it back to Washington, D.C. and Baghdad. And they're all like, you're crazy. First of all, Saddam Hussein's not in that little bitty town. We've been to every single house. And oh, by the way, you're getting all your information from prisoners, the enemy. They could be completely just lying to you. We'd never done this before, Mike. We'd never gone after a high value target just exclusively with prisoners. So this is all exciting. 5 months of this, my tour's coming to an end, and my Delta, Bam Bam, my Delta Force commander said, throw everything on the table. If you can get us to this bodyguard, maybe we can find Saddam. But he said, Eric, when you leave, this will get shut down. Nobody thinks we're on to anything. So the last week, every single night, we do raids to try to get this bodyguard, right? And the driver takes us to 5 safe houses. Bodyguard's not there. People at the safe house said, no, you actually pushed the bodyguard to this town of Samara. We went to this location. He's not there. The people in that house said, wait. The bodyguard, the guy you're looking for, is at this rental house. We knew he'd be there and he wasn't there, but the bodyguard's son was there. And then the son comes in on my last day into Crete. I'm going back to Baghdad. I'm finished up. And I knew I had one night. And the son of the bodyguard says, my dad doesn't like me anymore. I wish he respected me. And it wasn't an interrogation, right? He's like crying on me. And I'm sitting there on my last night, like trying, hoping, but I knew I had to listen to this kid. And I really connected with him. And he said, I just wish we did things like when I was a kid. He goes, my dad never takes me fishing anymore. And I said, anymore? You mean your dad still goes fishing? He goes, yeah, my dad still goes fishing with his buddies, but they don't take me. And I remembered, Mike, one of the early interrogations that I did when I got to this little town of Tikrit, we captured Saddam Hussein's cook. It was a chef. The chef knew everything. And the chef told me, he said, you know, Saddam just likes this fish dish. His favorite dish is called mazgoof. And the chef said, I make the best mazgoof in the world. I'm Saddam's cook. I've cooked every meal for this guy for 8 straight years. He can't go anywhere without this fish. And I'm talking to this boy, and he's like, yeah, my dad doesn't take me fishing. I said, where do they go fishing? And the boy said, well, they go fishing along the Tigris River. I said, where? He goes, they just built a fish pond next to the river. And when the boy said they built the fish pond, why would you build a fish pond during the middle of a war unless you need to have the stocked pond because you couldn't go to the market and buy fish for your brutal dictator boss because the United States occupied your country. So here I am on the last night, and I go to Bam Bam, and I'm like, man, we got one more shot at this. He goes, man, I hope he's there. I hope your bodyguard's there. We're going to the fish pond. And the last night we raided the fish pond, and my bodyguard wasn't there. And I thought that was it. And so Bam Bam, he captures these 2 fishermen, right? And he goes, well, I got you some fishermen, and I got all these prisoners. This whole 5 months of work. We go back to Baghdad. My tour's up. I'm leaving, and they say, okay, the next day we're going to take your prisoners and send them to Abu Ghraib, that big prison. But that night, I said, all right, let's do one more interrogation. Let me interrogate the fisherman. I interrogate the fisherman. They open up. We connected. Fisherman says, yeah, Muhammad Ibrahim, I was stocking this pond for him. He would get fish. He came and got an address of somebody I know in Baghdad. I think he's there. So I got the location. I thought, we got one more raid, last one. And they tell me, okay, your flight's leaving the country on December 13th at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I called the commander and said, please, can you do this raid? And they don't tell you anything. They're like, yeah, maybe we'll put it on the list. And the days came and went. And on the last day at 1 o'clock in the morning, on December 13th, my flight leaves in 7 hours. The Delta Force commander in Baghdad calls and says, hey, man, we did that last raid. We didn't find anything. He said, your bodyguard wasn't there. Saddam wasn't there. They said, we can bring you the prisoners from the house. They brought all the prisoners to me. Started to interrogate, connect, boom, boom, realized, wait a second. One of these prisoners is Muhammad Ibrahim's secondhand man. We were on to something. And I get this prisoner to break in about 45 minutes. And he turns to me and he said, you guys actually got the bodyguard last night. He was sleeping next to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we got him. So I go to the prisoners. I start lifting up hoods, and I see the bodyguard, the guy that I thought could take us to Saddam. And now it's 4 a.m. I bring him in. I set him down. And this is it. It all comes down to this. This one guy that I thought could take us to Saddam. My flight leaves in 4 hours, and they're not turning it around. I can't not take the flight because they think I'm crazy anyway. I interrogated him, and it took me 90 minutes. And in 90 minutes, he says, I know where he is, and I'll take you. And we tried to draw the sketch and the map, and it took us a while. And finally got the exact location, and I went out, and I told them, I said, this guy knows where he is. He says, in Tikrit, Eric, we told you Saddam Hussein's not there. Go get on your flight. I'm like, no, you have to do this. And I gave him the sketch and the map. And I said, please call Bam Bam. And they said, we'll call Bam Bam. You're out of here. I got on the plane and I left the country. And with this task force, you don't just go home. You got to go to Doha, Qatar. That's the headquarters for the Joint Special Operations Command. I show up the next day for my briefing. I've got to brief, my whole tour. And when I showed up, the senior officer brought me inside and he looks at me and he said, all briefings are canceled because we got Saddam Hussein last night. He said, your bodyguard did it. He took us to the exact spot. And from that point, my life changed forever. I still wasn't allowed to go home back to LA. I was taken to Washington, D.C., went to the Pentagon. And from then, everyone kind of said, how do you do this? How do you make these prisoners talk? And that was the beginning of kind of my new career as the kind, empathy-based listening interrogator. Mike, I think you're muted.
I was going to say that. I saw your mouth moving, Mike.
Sorry about that. What I said when I was muted was every time I hear that story now, that's the fourth time, and the hair on my arm still stands up because I know the entire story and how you went about getting there. And this is the very short version, but one of the things that I think was huge for me hearing your story, and again, the wild and crazy ride you went on, not even knowing how you're going to end up there and one day ending up there, was you were beating your head against the wall day in and day out, interrogating these prisoners the same way every day. So the definition of insanity, right? You're going in there, you're doing it over and over and over again. And when we think of interrogating, we think of waterboarding. We think of all of these cruel ways that in the past people have been interrogated. And the way that you ended up coming about that, I mean, just tell us that aha moment that you were like, wow, I've been asking all the questions, but without giving it away here, finally you got to the point where it's like, they just need to know that I care, that I'm here for them, that I'm listening to them, and that I need to care. So tell us about that.
Right. So it's really difficult when you're in the military to change policy, right? When you are taught something, when you're taught military doctrine, they say follow the training, follow the doctrine. So when I realized these prisoners aren't cooperating, what I couldn't do is go, I'm going to change things just for the heck of it. It just feels fun. I'll be the guy that changes. No, I had to go and look at it, right? And I had to figure out what are the reasons why. And the biggest thing is I had to figure out what is the genesis of the problem. And the genesis of the problem with the old interrogation techniques are that when you captured somebody on the battlefield in World War II, World War I, they're in a uniform. They're a pilot, a downed pilot. They're in a uniform with a chain of command. The debate of whether or not they are the enemy or working for or a member of the enemy military, that's not a debate. Now, they can question whether or not they need to or not give you information. But when you are dealing with an insurgent, you capture them at their house. There's no smoking gun. There's no evidence. It's somebody else's word, and that somebody else may be a spy that doesn't want to be revealed, so you can't bring any evidence. And they're sitting here looking like every other civilian that is innocent. Plausible deniability is a killer. So you can't use any sort of threat. What I had to do then is go, okay, what is the motivation for this person to actually want to be with me? And I had to bring into, and I realized, like, I can't just promise them freedom, because in their mind, they're going, I shouldn't be here. If I shut up and do nothing, I'll be released. If I admit information to you, I will be detained longer. So I said, I have to build a connection that makes them want to come to me. And the only connection that I could find wasn't being a friend or being kind. It was listening. It's this amazing thing that people don't want to just be smiled at, or complimented. They want to be liked because they're understood. And because they're liked, they want to be listened to. Think about that. If you're seeking to understand someone, you're putting enough value into them that you say, I want to know what you're doing. And when you demonstrate that you like someone enough, they are drawn towards you. And then when they're put in a position of need, where else do you want to go than to somebody who likes you, who's drawn towards you, not falsely, not because of materialistic gain, because they're truly interested. And that's the power, Mike. That's the thing that I realized. This is not about favoritism. This is not about reciprocity. This is about understanding through listening.
So I think one thing that a lot of us didn't realize when you were telling the story originally, and today as well, you didn't speak the same language as any of these people. So you were dealing with someone that was translating for you on top of it. So it's not even speaking the same language, and you have to get this understanding across to them that you care and that you are their friend. You're here to help them.
So come to find out, they don't speak Chinese in Iraq. So therefore, I had a problem. Well, the way it works is the Delta Force team had 3 different translators, Arabic speaking, Iraqi dialect of Arabic. And we had this fantastic advantage in the fact that we went to war in Iraq in 1991, and a bunch of those Iraqi citizens, mainly Shia, because Saddam was Sunni, so he was very mean to the Shia. Many of them escaped to the United States and become U.S. citizens. So we use those they're now U.S. citizens. We use them as our translators. But I had a language barrier. You remember, every single prisoner, I interrogated 300 prisoners during this tour to track down Saddam. They all spoke Iraqi dialect of Arabic. That's a barrier. I had a person that had to go through there. There are cultural barriers, there are religious barriers, there's the war barrier. So one of the things that I really like to talk about is, if you look at what we're going through right now, okay, with this pandemic and this remote communication, how many of you out there are going, wow, I've got this barrier, I've got this problem, I'm talking remotely with my clients and my prospects, and I'm a face-to-face, I'm a touchy, I like to give that handshake, and I will tell you, it's a barrier for everyone. And if you look at this as an opportunity to, how do I gain that communication? Because what I did is I said, wait a second, this language barrier, those are words, but connection, it's an understanding, not comprehension, but listening to meaning. I had a closer connection with my prisoners because of the language barrier, but I would have never been able to seek that sort of connection minus words, right? It's looking at an individual who goes deaf or goes blind, and if they go blind, they can hear so many things, right? They can hear somebody walking across the room and tell you who it is. It's because the other senses heighten. And what I'm telling you is, when you now have this barrier that we're all having to deal with, you've got to understand, you still need to make that connection. You still need to get inside of them. Look at this camera, right? I'm not looking down at things. I'm not multitasking. And I understand I'm presenting to you, so I better not be doing some other things, because those distractions are a key indicator that you're not listening. But what I'm also doing is I'm looking through this camera to you. There is a connection here, and it can be stronger than in person. And the benefit is, everyone else's standard is this distance without this connection. And if we learn to communicate, truly connect, even with this barrier, you can get closer to your clients and to your prospects than you even had before.
I would say, speaking for probably every owner operator out there and every agent out there, the number one thing a buyer and seller looks for is an agent that they trust. And there's nothing that's going to gain their trust more than listening to their wants and their needs, right? And their concerns. And today it's their fears. So I think this whole topic to me is huge right now. But I think this is the time when our agents can go out there and really capitalize and leave their mark with all of their clients, and even those that may not have been clients, just to talk and communicate, and again, be the cavalier and the one to deliver the message and to set their minds at ease that their fears, we're here to help them, but listen to what those fears are. Everybody's are different. Yours are different than mine are, that are different than Peter's are, so listen.
But okay, Mike, you said something that was very powerful just there. And I want to make sure that we hear it and that we're practicing that. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and let's say, do we believe this? Do we truly believe this? Because you said the most important thing that our clients want to know is that they can trust. Trust is number one. That I think we can all agree upon. Trust is the key in your industry. But you said, and the way to gain that trust is through listening. But let me ask you this. Have we seen, with not your agents, but maybe, have we seen where when agents are meeting with the prospect, that are they truly listening, or do they listen just enough and then go straight to delivering a solution? Do they think, oh, I can put them in this house if it's a buyer, and if it's a seller, you're going, okay, here's how I'm going to list, here's all these things I'm going to do. You start thinking of your agenda, your goals that are solution based, but you stop listening to them. And it comes down to this thing, right? So when people say, Eric, what is the secret sauce? And I know I didn't get into too much, but there is a secret sauce of my interrogation, my communication, and it is gaining empathy to build trust. To gain empathy means I've got to put myself in your shoes. But we know trust. So let's say everyone agrees trust is the number one key. What the problem is, too many times when we really want to gain that trust, which is when we want to win a client, we want to get that listing, we think, I have this information. I want to sell them. I want to tell them. I want to show them how many others houses I have listed. I'm the number one seller. Look at these awards. Look at Coldwell. My gosh. And that's okay, right? I look at it like this, okay? You as an agent working for Coldwell, you're this very powerful ship, this boat in a body of water, and you go down this body of water and you've created this wake of success. And that success is your brand, your achievements, your personal accomplishments, your stature, the fact that you look very well dressed, you're well spoken, you're well informed, and you're going down this body of water. And when we're trying to win someone over, we tell them, look at this wake of success. And if we don't listen to them and stop to discover their needs versus assuming their needs, what we do is we say, we have this body of this boat in a wake of success. I'm gonna tether you to the back, and I'm gonna drag you along, and you are going to get the fumes and the sprays of my success. And the person goes, they don't really care about me. They sure are successful though. They do such good work and they're going in a successful direction. I'm going to get dragged towards that success, but they don't care about me. And that's okay. Here's the deal. I want you to keep that boat. I want you to keep that wake of success. I want you to be the Caldwell agent who's very powerful and successful and number one in your district. But I want you to put them in the boat. And the way you do that is when you talk to them, you don't talk about your successes and what you're going to do to them until you discover all their needs. You have to listen to them. And if you say, well, I'm a pretty good listener, I'm going to tell you, on average, people only listen at 25% of what they hear. 25%. If you will use this empathy-based listening, you can get deep into the 90s of listening. But to get deep into the 90s, you have to understand you have all these mental distractions. I can go through it. Mike, I'll give you this white paper. It's got the 6 categories of distraction. It's really interesting where these distractions come in. But for you all, and for most professionals, highly successful professionals, the 5th category of distractions was category 1 through 6. Category 1's like not super significant to reducing your listening to build trust. Category 6 is the most important. Category 6 is thinking of what you're going to say during a conversation. But that's the biggest distraction we have is I'm thinking of a real zinger. I'm thinking I'm going to make myself look good or look cool. I want to be funny. But the one right above it, the most significant category of distraction is thinking of your agenda, your goals during the conversation. And that's the one I want us to look at, because when we're talking to a prospect or a client, are we understanding their needs? And I always say we have to discover. If you go, I'm pretty good at that. Go, you know what? Discover one more level. Ask one more question. And really, if you really think you're good at it, let me listen to you in a conversation. Because I'm going to tell you, if you're anywhere above 25%, the problem is everyone tends to be at 25%. And if you're at 27%, you think you're great. I'm telling you, you can get into the 90s. And when you do, this magical thing happens. And that's what I mean about trust, Mike. You talk trust. We talk trust. You and I are close. I trust you because when I engage with you, I feel like I'm the only person in the room. And I know you feel that way with me. I know your dad feels that way with me. When I listen to somebody, they're like, the world goes away around Eric Maddox. And that's the same. Well, we want everybody on our team to have that. And then we want that to be a part of our culture. We want somebody to walk into the Caldwell office and go, I just like being here. Yeah, I want you to sell my house. And then who do you recommend as a plumber? Who does your roof? Like you become an advocate for them, and they become an advocate for your entire company. Then they become a champion. Let me ask you how important are referrals in real estate? That's everything. Dragging them behind the boat of your wake of success. I don't care how big that wake of success is. You tether them to the back. They are not going to be a champion for you. You put them in the boat and watch them. They won't shut up they won't let somebody close to them sell a house without you being the listing agent. I love this stuff, Mike. So I'm going to stop because I'll keep going.
I've been trying to get you to come work for me for a lot of years now. And boy, if you can do that, I'll keep trying. So this is awesome. There's so many things that tie this to what we do. And I guess I would ask this question of everybody that's watching this, is that differentiate you from your competition? If everybody's at 25%, and you're able to listen and they feel that no one listens to them the way that you do, is that a differentiator? I think we spend so much time looking out there for ways that we can show the technology that differentiates us, all these, these tricks and tools and products. At the end of the day, we've got them. We've got our 2 ears and the more we listen to their wants and their needs and they trust us, that is a differentiator. And I think that's huge. I think one thing, and again, Peter, I think we want to open this up for Q&A here pretty soon. But what has the military, you didn't touch on military. Now, they've gone away from their style of interrogation since you were sent over to Iraq. And what have they asked you to do? You want to talk a little bit about that?
So when I said my life changed after the capture of Saddam, so when I was taken back to Washington, D.C., I was taken directly to the Pentagon, to the office of then Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld. And I briefed Secretary Rumsfeld, and then they took me to Langley, the headquarters of CIA at the top floor. And the head of, at the time, was George Tenet. I briefed George Tenet and the entire CIA intel team. Then they took me back to the Pentagon. And at this point, I'm with all these admirals and generals. And as we go into Secretary Rumsfeld's office, he says, send Maddox back. Send Staff Sergeant Maddox back to Iraq. And one of the admirals said, Mr. Secretary, Staff Sergeant Maddox is a Chinese Mandarin linguist, and he's got to go back to Los Angeles. So Secretary Rumsfeld, I don't know if you guys remember Secretary Rumsfeld, he makes very quick decisions, hopefully good ones, but he's very strong. And he said, nope, I want my own team of interrogators. I don't want to have to borrow from the Army and the Marine Corps anymore. He goes, I want my own team, and they will fall under the Defense Intelligence Agency. And by the time I did get back home to LA, over that 3 days, Secretary Rumsfeld got the funding and gave it to the Defense Intelligence Agency and created a 30-person team of civilian interrogators. And I was hired as the first one. Well, they said, go teach this thing, this technique. And I taught it, and it was one of those, it wasn't well received because it was just too nice. So I struggled to get the military to implement it. But what I then did immediately was go back out with the Joint Special Operations Command. And we showed that success again, right? And I will tell you, on average, the old techniques, using the old military interrogation techniques, they break prisoners at 4%. And that's not good. Like, I know you're like, is that good or bad? But 4% success rate is not good at anything. This technique that I created in this 30-person interrogation team. So I went on for the next 10 years. I did a total of 2,700 interrogations of prisoners from 25 different countries over 8 deployments. My 1,000 plus the 30-person interrogation team, the other thousands that they did, we break prisoners at 65%. 65%. And it's really, there's 2 camps. You either do it with empathy-based listening, about collaboration, understanding that we're not here to punish people for joining the enemy against us, that we're here to eliminate them as a threat and eliminate the threat that caused them to join? Or is there the camp of threat, punishment, detention, and incarceration that's really about building a prison? And it just struggles to gather any intel. So for the next 10 years, that was a real struggle for me because I was fighting this war, this small kind of seed. And, you know, it's had a lot of success, but there's still an ongoing battle with trying to figure out, should we do it the old way? So, you know, I will tell you, you would think things are obvious. And if you leave this meeting and you go, it's obvious, empathy-based listening is the way I need to be, just know it's not natural. It can't be read in a book. It has to be, it's like your brain, it's a muscle. It's got to be practiced and massaged. It has to become a habit. And so what I want to challenge you to do, and the way that I've challenged interrogators is if I had to ask you a question, what's the purpose of a conversation? A lot of people say the purpose of conversation is to gather information, transfer information, to influence, or basic entertainment. I just like hanging around this person. It's kind of back and forth. I think the number one reason for any conversation, unless an alarm's going off and there's a fire burning something down, then you might just want to inform. Other than something extremely time sensitive, the purpose of a conversation needs to be building trust. You don't build trust through influence of your word. You build trust by listening, to understand, to seek to understand.
Well, I can tell you that Peter and I are breaking the rule right now of empathetic listening because we're trying to read Q&A on one side and comments on another side while you're talking. I'm just glad I've seen it all before. Peter, jump in here, but I will say that a couple comments that I've seen is, wow, this is amazing. Thank you for your service. I thank you again for probably the 50th time for your service and everything you've done. Some people have asked, when's the movie coming out? Peter, do you want to go into others, some of the other questions you see?
Yeah, sure. One of the questions from Stephen Sladik is, what do you feel is the most important aspect to listening and making sure the person you're talking to knows you're actually listening?
Wow. That was a front-loaded question. Okay. So tell me that person's name. Tell me his name again.
Stephen.
Who? All right, Stephen, check it out. I hope you're listening to me, Stephen, but I don't know that you are because you can't demonstrate that to me. Your question just demonstrated that you're pretty dialed in. You know what you just did? You made my day. You made me drawn towards you. I really legitimately wanted to ask, but tell me your name again. Hey, won't we link up on Facebook, man? We'll probably be friends, right? I like you because I'm drawn towards you. But the reason is because you were able to demonstrate that to me. Check this out. The only way we can demonstrate that we're listening with empathy is we have to respond. And how do you respond? I tell people, when somebody has when you have a conversation with someone, every comment they make, they're going to drop a breadcrumb. Something that says, are you listening to me or not? And the reason is because in every conversation, I don't care if it's with your spouse, one of your children, somebody you just met, you're trying to get a listing for, or somebody you're interrogating in the middle of a battlefield. At that moment in time, they're asking themselves, does this person I'm talking to, do they care more about me or themselves? Okay. Now, they're going to drop a breadcrumb. It's not something they intentionally do, but you have to know how to pick out the breadcrumb, right? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to demonstrate what the breadcrumb might or may not be on your next question. I don't know what these questions are. Peter or Mike, ask me the next question. Let's see if there's a breadcrumb. Sometimes they're big loaves of bread and sometimes little bitty pieces. But we'll see what those breadcrumbs are. Next question.
Actually, I'm going to jump in real quick. This kind of goes hand in hand with that. Michelle asked, do you feel like if you're taking notes during a conversation, it's distraction, or it helps you listen and remember better?
Okay. What we want to do here, I'm going to demonstrate what I want to do as an empathy-based listener, right? I can answer this question. I can go in this question and say, was it Michelle? Was it Michelle?
Yeah, Michelle.
Okay, I'd say Michelle. Absolutely, taking notes is better. There's statistics that prove that if you take notes, people who take notes retain up to 15% more information than people who don't. That's not up to, it's on average. I can even go, if I showed you the stack of notes I've got over here, Michelle, when I got back from Iraq, I had like 600 pages of notes, right? That's proving a point, making a point, but I'm not listening to her. What I would do if this was a back and forth conversation, I would say, I believe there are benefits to taking notes in terms of retention. But Michelle, let me ask you this. Right now, do you take notes or do you not? Right? Because I want to get feedback. Because I'm going to tell Michelle, listen, if you do not take notes, it's going to benefit you if you do. But when you start, understand you're listening. If you think you're 25%, it's going to go down 2% because you're bringing in an active skill that's going to interfere with your actual listening. So understand you're going to have a big dip in listening. So what I want you to do, just start at 1 or 2 minutes during a conversation to kind of get your skills up there. But Michelle, check this out. You know the beauty of empathy-based listening? We talked about demonstration that Stephen asked about. When I'm sitting here taking notes, people go, man, he's dialed into what I'm saying. In category 3, I've talked about 6 categories of distractions. You know what category 3 distraction is? Category 3 is any term, acronym, or statement that you don't understand, right? Like if I sat there and said, I was a 97 Echo when I was in the military, but before that I was 11 Bravo, and my was my MOS, and I went to AIT and blah, 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 blah. You're sitting there going, I don't know what this means. Your listening dips really, really far below. But when you're taking notes, if they ever use an acronym or a term you don't know, and you go, wait, I'm trying to get this down. What is that? You just demonstrate that you're dialed in, which makes them even more drawn to you. So the power of taking notes, not only is going to help your retention, but there's no more way of demonstrating than doing that. Now, here's what I want to do. Michelle, let me ask you something. Because I want to know if you do take notes, but do you see where that could help you in demonstrating your listening, right? Because it's about the person you're listening to. Like I literally am struggling because I can't look and hear the person on the other end because I'm sitting here going, does that make sense? Do you get it? Because my only goal is to dive into you, right? I want to put myself in your shoes to understand. Does this make sense?
Thank you. Kellyanne is asking, how do you control nonverbal reactions while listening? Facial nonverbal stuff.
Did you say, did Kellyanne say, how do you control it?
Yeah, she says she's very animated. So she's curious to see how that impacts conversation.
Well, I don't know anything about that, Kellyanne. I can't imagine dealing with somebody who talks with their hands all the time. I would say your openness of being you shows transparency. It shows that you're not hiding anything. I mean, it's about trust, right? You want to demonstrate that you trust the person that you're talking to. And the more open you can be and animated, says, wow, they really trust me. It's interesting that you said control, right? Because my preconceived notion, which is a distraction, which reduces my listening, thought you were going to say, how do you interpret nonverbal communication? But you didn't. You said, how do you control it? And so let's take it to this level, okay? People talk about active listening. They say, you know what good active listening is? It's leaning in. It's eye contact. It's nodding. It's open posture. No. That's the fruit of active listening. You don't want to demonstrate the fruit unless the roots and the seed are truly there. The true foundation of active listening is seeking to understand. It's diving in, right? Like, I have this table here because otherwise I'd be like 3 inches from this camera going, you got me, you feel it, right? Like, I want to hear you, and I want you to hear me. I'm sure I have an open posture. I'm sure I'm leaning in. That's the fruit. But Kellyanne, you be you, right? You be you, and people will be drawn towards that.
Eric, 2 things here. Someone asked, can we share the other 6 levels of listening distractions with us? I think you can get me that white paper and we'll share it with everyone.
Yes.
Okay. And then Bob Taylor asked, who did you learn this method from? And why? I know this, I think I know this answer, but, or did you just naturally come to it? And I think there was that aha moment for you, right?
Well, yeah, I created this, but I didn't create understanding the value of empathy. I mean, if you look at the great book of Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, he was able to communicate that so well. What the process that I created is, I want it to be step by step, okay? So I will give you the steps because this is very important to me. If you want to be an empathy-based listener, the goal is to gain trust. During verbal communications, step 1, we have to recognize there's a problem, right? I think we stole that from another step process, but you got to admit there's a problem. Step 2, the problem is we're bad listeners at 25%. The reason we're bad listeners is we have these mental distractions that are lower in our listening. The reason we have mental distractions is because our brain can hear 5 times faster than the average person can talk. So it's where somebody's yapping along, right? We get bored out of our mind because we have all this excess capacity. What do we do with it? Anything else we want? What are those things that come in 6 categories? I get you those 6 categories, but let's talk about the last 3. The last 3 are most critical. Category 4, biases towards the individual you're talking to. It filters what you hear from them. Category 5, your objectives, goals in a conversation, thinking about what you want to sell, what you want them to do, how you want to influence them. Category 6, you thinking about what you're going to say next in that conversation. Let's put those distractions behind us. But here's the next step. I got these distractions behind me. I go from 25% to 50%. I need you deep in the 90s, and you go deep in the 90s by doing one thing. Everything you do towards your agenda is to seek to understand at this moment in time, how does this individual look at this topic of conversation right now? That is what empathy is about. And the kind of the boilerplate way to do it is go, do you realize every time you're talking to somebody, they have their own, everybody has 6 categories. But what's in those categories, if we discover those, that's the portals of empathy to understanding that person. But I don't need you to figure out what those 6 categories are, right? I just need you to demonstrate that you're seeking to understand what those 6 categories are. You seek to understand. If you seek to understand, your listening will jack up into the 90s. And if you can maintain that, they're going to look at you and go, what's up with you? Just like Mike and his dad have done. They go, something's up with this guy. Why is he so interesting to talk to? Why am I drawn towards him? Why do I know I'm the only person in the room? It's because there's nothing on my brain other than I'm just curious. What's going on with you with this? How does this mean to you? I want to know that, right? That's the process. But I will get you that white paper.
So Diana Perez asks, what do you do when the person is not reacting to you?
Well, that's a problem. I can tell you this camera's not really reacting to me right now. So you got to have confidence in what you do. But really, it's kind of going to be impossible not to react to me, because every time I finish a statement, I always finish it off with, like, if we were together and you could react to me, I would say, does that make sense? Okay. Are we tracking? If you do this and the person does not react to you, we have misdiagnosed what their categories are, or something's wrong with them. They have an agenda that's so far beyond actually wanting to have a connection that then we didn't realize that and kept figuring out their category 5 distraction. I would just say, I would love to ask you a follow-up question on that. Like, give me an example, because 99.9% of the time, we're not actually listening when we think we are. If we're not getting the reaction we want, we're not listening. This is the most powerful psychological force that exists. Look at me. This is the most powerful psychological force that exists, is this empathy-based listening.
Peter, we've got about 4 minutes here. If you've got a couple more questions for Eric.
Yeah, let me look.
Eric, there's one here that asks if there's any other books that you'd recommend that would help lead people to this theory.
Well, I keep this one nearby. Just kidding. That's my book. Mission Blacklist, #1. I like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I like a lot of negotiation books, because the negotiation are about collaboration. So if you look at Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, there's some cool stories. And he writes it in kind of a macho tone. That guy's empathy all the way. He's pretty genius. I like stuff by Robert Cialdini. He talks about the 6 principles of influence. And then I like Outliers, right? Because what does it do? It gets down to the root, the foundation of issues and phenomenons. So if somebody had to say, Eric, what's kind of your secret sauce beyond the empathy-based listening? It's like, I like to investigate to find the root of the problem. Let's peel this onion. Because you can imagine, if you are an empathy-based listener and you're seeking to understand, you're a discoverer, well, when somebody has an issue with a relationship or a situation, you dig one, like, oh, so it's not really money. Right? And when you talk to your prospects and clients, if they say, what's your commission? That just simply means I'm making this a commodity. I'm trying to commoditize you. But there's some other issues that we haven't got to trust. Because once you gain that trust, and they'll never ask about rate again. They'll never ask about commission again, right? But we have to discover. So I like that as well. And then any kind of negotiations books.
You know, one I see here real quick, and we're coming up on a couple of minutes, but Christina Norman asked, sometimes when I know there's an important piece of information a client is holding back on, how do I get them to kind of open up and tell us?
Fantastic question. The reason they're holding back, you haven't got to that level of trust yet. You're not listening above 75%. You got to get to 75%, and they'll go, okay, you care more about me than you do yourself. They are holding back important piece of information. That's why they're dropping breadcrumbs. You got to pick those breadcrumbs up. Listen, don't pry for the information. You become a better listener. You've got to listen with empathy. If you listen to empathy, they're going to open up. They're going to tell you everything. If you wonder, are they holding back information? Yes, everybody is. Everybody is. You have to earn the trust, which you have to listen. Okay? So learn how to identify your distractions, put them behind you, pick up the breadcrumbs, and they'll go, here's everything. Here's something I wasn't going to tell you. Here's some other stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the house that I was going to tell you, right? But don't go probing. They'll come to you. It's about trust. Mike, I think I'm out of your time.
Peter, do you have anything else before we conclude here?
I just want to say thank you, Mike. Thank you for getting Eric to join us. Eric, thank you so much for everything you've done for our country, for us today. All the veterans on this call, thank you guys so much. I've done like 70 of these Zoom calls in the last month and a half or so, and I think I've listened more on this one. So thank you for that. Thank you for everything.
All I wanted to hear.
Eric, my friend, like I said, we will have you to Indiana and our Michigan offices where they haven't had the pleasure of hearing your entire story, hopefully soon here, once we get back to normal. But again, thank you for your service. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for helping us through this. We'll try to get the questions answered, right, Peter, and back out. But again, Eric, great to see you, bud.
Thanks, Mike. You tell your dad I said hi.
I will. Take care, everybody.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.